Hello, everybody. Happy Hump Day. Welcome back to the Producer's Perspective Live. How is everybody on this Wednesday? It is Wednesday, right? How's everybody? Good to see you all. Look, you're all saying hi to Mary. Look at this. Hi, Mary. Oh, hey, Mary. Hi, Mary. What about Ken? For God's sake, I'm the one hosting this thing. Where's the Ken? Oh, look. It looks like, is that Mary's dad? It is Mary's dad. Look, Mary's dad. Everyone, Mary, maybe you should have your own live stream. Anyway, welcome to all of you watching live, including Mary's dad. Welcome to all of you watching on replay. We know so many of you watch on the replays now. We're hearing this more and more, so I'm trying to give you a special shout out. Mary always reminds me, Dad, she's very good at reminding me you've raised a great young lady. Ken, don't forget to talk about the replay people, all the replay people. There's actually thousands and thousands watching on replay, so whatever day it is you are watching on, welcome to the show. You can catch all of the 50 episodes we have done since this pandemic began on my Facebook page. Just click on the videos. They're all there, all 50 of them. And we're now streaming through lots of different places. So welcome to all of you on Broadway Podcast Network. Welcome to all of you on Broadway On Demand. Welcome to all of you who are, I don't know, streaming it, walking around your apartment or your house or wherever you are. So welcome to all of you. We had a double feature last night on the 50th anniversary show. We had Jamil Jude and Mary Neely, viral social media sensation Mary Neely, where I tried to convince her to give up her career as a successful screenwriter and, join us in the theater, because now is such a great time to enter the theater business. I thought she'd take me up on it. She didn't. Anyway, we're back. Anyway, tonight we have an amazing guest. So literally this director has worked on so many hits. I decided today that he could have his own album of like the Michael Greif hit album next to Normal, Rent, Dear Evan Hansen, Great Guard, all of them. In fact, I'll give you a little very producer-like statistic that I wonder, and we'll ask him. He can think about this if anyone has ever asked him this question before. But Michael Greif's recoupment rate, that's right, the number of musicals that he has directed that have made money, it's like almost 50%. 50% in a business where 1 out of 5, that's the average, 1 out of 5 shows make money. Not when Michael Greif is directing, it's 50%. So Michael, or if Michael's agent is watching, take those fees up. There's just a 50% chance you're going to make money if you invest in a show. Anyway, all those big hits. What's happening in the news today? Lots of stuff, actually. So the first thing I woke up to, because this happened overnight, because they're ahead of us, theaters in Italy have announced they're going to open in June. Will the West End fall? This is from London Theatre Direct. Theaters in Italy are going to open. So what I know, it's for those of us in New York, watching here in New York City and New York State, it's been devastating to go through this, both for so many of you personally, and it's been stressful, and obviously professionally, the Broadway shows are shut down still. We don't know when they're going to come back. Here's the upside. Because we've been hit so severely, we get to sit back and watch what everyone else is doing. And eyes are on Italy because they were hit very badly. So we'll be watching to see how they come back in June. What other news? This is a good one. This is brand new, breaking news. Broadway, remember last night how we were cutting up on the fact that Grease was going to be shown instead of the Tony Awards? Well, Broadway On Demand, brand new streaming service, announced today that in collaboration with the Wing and the Broadway League, they're going to be having a Tony Awards celebration event they're going to be streaming. I heard a little bit about this today. It sounds very, very exciting because of my relationship with Broadway On Demand. So I'm just glad we have something to tune into. So I'll bring more information. Maybe we should have Broadway On Demand on, Mary. Maybe we should have them on and talk a little bit about what's going to come and reveal some secrets to us. I don't know. We'll try and do that. Also, this is my favorite fun news item. Eaglehawk, which is a startup company in Buffalo, they're creating drones to disinfect venues. And people were saying today, maybe we could use them for theaters. That's right. When everyone leaves, a little drone would take off and spray the entire theater. this is what's really cool about this, is that the whole world is working on solutions to this unbelievable problem. And it's actually amazing and a real testament to the American spirit and the worldwide entrepreneurial spirit on ideas like that and all sorts of other things that are coming down the pike to try to get us all back to work and get us back to entertaining people faster. Speaking of entertaining people, let's bring on the guy that has one of the best recruitment rates of all directors throughout history. Please welcome to the live stream, Mr. Michael Greif. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, Ken. Thank you very much. I've never quite been introduced that way or myself that way, but okay, I'll take it.
Have you ever thought of that before? Has that crossed your mind before, how commercially successful your shows are?
You know, when Dear Evan Hansen became something of a phenomenon, I thought, well, this is pretty great and pretty unusual that I get another one of these. There were successful shows between Rent and Dear Evan Hansen, but it's pretty great to have a blockbuster and to have a show that seems to get people talking and seems to open people's minds and covers new ground.
So tell me, let's get into that. So what do you look for? What is this bit of a Midas touch you have? What do you look for when you sign on to a new project?
Oh, I think the Midas touch has more to do with, you know, I have the luxury of really being able to read a lot of material and look at a lot of shows, and then I get to be selective about what it is I'd like to spend, you know, months or years working on. So, you know, I like to think that I can read a script and I can understand interesting characters that an audience will identify with. And I like to think that, you know, I can recognize music that people will find exciting and innovative. But I depend a whole lot on the writers, and then I depend a whole lot on the actors to make those hits with me, as well as the designers, the physical world of those plays.
So I've been asking all my guests this. Where were you when the virus hit the fan? When you realized that something big was happening and that this was going to be different?
Yeah, I had, you know, I had that week in March, you know, probably March 7th or 8th. I actually went to see a show at the Bushwick Star, and riding the subway, it was the L train on a Saturday night. It felt like, oh, this is exactly what you shouldn't be doing. This is wrong. I had never felt that way about being on the subway before ever in my whole life. So that was an inkling. And then I was actually in some auditions the whole following week at Bernie Telsey for a musical lab of The Notebook that we were going to do in April, which we ended up doing on Zoom, which we can talk about a little later. So I spent that week in auditions, and the Telsey company was spectacularly on top of how to make the environment safe and feel safe. And of course, because, you know, New York actors are New York actors, everyone came in. You know, they were careful. This is before we spoke of social distancing, but everyone was careful. Everyone was respectful. But, you know, it didn't surprise me that everybody came in. And that was the whole week. You know, that was Monday through Friday. And then I think we heard on Thursday that the theaters were closing. I was actually, Kevin McCullum is producing The Notebook. He had very graciously invited me to the 6 opening that Thursday, you know, that Thursday night. My collaborators and I, you know, we all showed up for auditions in our party clothes, and we found out in the course of the afternoon that there'd be no show. It was good to be with a lot of theater people to hear that news. And then the next day, we actually did have a brief session of callbacks. And again, I was really impressed with how the Telsey company made that work environment safe and made people feel safe. And then I just went home, and that was it. And I was actually on my own for a couple of days. And then I got a call from I Have Kids with a lesbian couple. And it turns out that those women called me to say, are you free to come with us? We're going to pack up our daughter and bring her back home. So another big event was, packing up the college apartment and bringing her home. And I've been with them in Brooklyn ever since.
So what is a typical day for you now, and how does that differ from 40 months ago? I know.
It differs quite a bit. I still do a whole lot of scheduling. That's the same. There's a lot of writing things in about what might happen, what week. And I've been really fortunate because I've actually done a number of Zoom labs, and I've found them to be very productive.
Really?
Certain things that you really can't get a sense of, but there are other things you can get a sense of. I've only done these labs with projects I've already been working on. So it's really given us the opportunity to focus on, a character's arc. There's a lot of book work that can be done, and I'm finding it very purposeful. So certainly a part of every day is about scheduling those, planning for those, making the most of those, being in a lot of Zoom meetings about those before we actually get there. But, other parts of the day, which I never had, were, go out on the deck and read from 4 to 5 when the sun is really strong. And, sometimes it feels wonderful and it feels like vacation and it feels like, oh, this is what retirement could be like if I'm really fortunate. And then other times, some terrible news crashes in. But I have a wonderful, wonderful group here to weather it with. I feel really, really fortunate to be with my family, my adult kids, their mothers, a couple of family friends. There's a lot of variety in the group, and we're being good to each other.
And what are you reading? Are you reading scripts or are you reading?
A combination. I'm actually, I was really happy that Michael Urie called me a couple of days ago and talked about doing doing a new play for a program he's doing called Pride Plays. I'm actually doing a play. Maybe I'm saying something I shouldn't say. I'm actually working with Rodney Hicks, an original member, on a play that he wrote. But I'm also reading a lot of novels. And I've always loved reading novels for pleasure. I've, combing through the best novels of, 2019 and catching up with those.
I really wanted you to say you're like reading Stephen King or Dean Koontz or something like really.
Well, I will say, in terms of Stephen King, just by coincidence, earlier this was probably maybe even late March, we did a little Stanley Kubrick film festival and we watched The Shining. And then, then I suggested a couple of nights later that we actually watched Dolores Claiborne, which I love love that movie. So there's been a lot of Stephen King adjacent, I've got to say. And, and I'll watch Carrie too anytime. So those are my doses of Stephen King.
Let's go back to the Zoom readings for a second. Any big tips? A lot of people that will be watching this are developing plays on their own or musicals on their own. Any big tips for the folks that want to do a Zoom reading?
I feel like you have to be realistic and generous about especially what you can do musically. There's you can get an idea of what the music is. You can get a sense of what the songs need to do lyrically. You get a sense of the dramatic work a song needs to cover. But like I said, I feel like I've been very fortunate because the shows I've been working on are shows that I've already heard in a room. I've heard an extraordinary ensemble of people singing those songs. I know what it feels like for a group to sing the song. So now when one person sings that song, I have a sense of it. But that's the big piece of advice is don't get hung up on what you can't do musically. There's a challenge in terms of time. Where one tip I have is pre-record tracks, and when you're doing a duet, have one person actually pre-recorded on the track. Another person could sing live to that person. I didn't make up that. I think maybe Ingrid Michaelson came up with that idea. Or Carmel Dean, our really good music director for The Notebook. So, but my big tip is really, you can really, really concentrate on what the book scenes are. I find too, because, there are certain things about performances you can glean when everyone's in a little box, but it's a good opportunity for me to just make sure that the material is doing all the work and we're not asking the actors to provide that magic thing that can't be repeated. You have to try to get it into the words and into the story and into. So that's my Zoom advice.
It's very good advice. I've done a couple of these myself, and they have their limitations. You have to manage your expectations going in. I think
exactly.
if you just embrace it.
That's really what it is. But if you say, I want to focus on this storyline, I want to let's go back and really deepen or sharpen or completely change. It's also great for chronology. It's like in a musical and you're juggling scenes around. And, again, for me, I love hearing lyrics read. So, I'll just ask the actor to read the lyrics and I'll hear what happens when we change the chronology of scenes around. And, it's like, you can do that in a rehearsal room and it takes a couple of hours. You do that in tech and it takes a couple of days. You can do it on Zoom in a couple of minutes. So just find your medium.
Have you done them for just pieces, or you all do the we're going to do the whole show, or you're like, oh, let's do these 3 scenes or this act? Or
It's been both. It's been both. And in the case of The Notebook, we actually did, we read through, we heard 2 acts.
Wow.
And Becca Brunstetter, a really, really terrific book writer, and Ingrid really, shook things up in the days we had together.
You've worked on so many new musicals and developed from an early stage, and obviously, as I keep mentioning, they've been very successful artistically, commercially. Is there a common note you find when you read new musicals? What's the one most common thing that you feel you have to affect to get it to the next step?
Well, I want to be moved by it, and I want to find its subject interesting. I'm sure there's a much better word for captivating. But really, I want it to be about something that a million other things aren't already about. And I want to be taken with the characters, and I really want to be moved. So, and
I want to flip back to the personal side for a second, because you said you have a daughter who's in college. Is she in the arts?
She'd like to be.
How is she dealing with all this? I'm a father of a 2-year-old, so I'm just thinking, how are you dealing with this? What are you telling her?
She's being remarkably flexible and adapting beautifully. She will hate this if she hears that I'm saying any of this, of course. She's given herself an incredible project, and she's given herself a good long project that's going to keep her busy through the summer. And every minute, every hour, the word on what college campuses are doing in the fall changes. And again, I'm unbelievably impressed with how flexible and how upbeat she's remaining. She's really fantastic.
What is she a performer? Is she going to be a performer, writer, director?
She'd like to work in film and television, and she'd like to produce. And sometimes that's managerial, and sometimes it's more creative. But she writes beautifully, and she's been producing student films for a couple of years already at her campus.
Film and TV, smart.
But it's good story. It's just, it all comes, make sure you've got a good story.
We have one question from coming in now. Wayne Stafford, what material, existing or not, do you feel would make for a great musical? Is there anything that think would be a great musical that hasn't been done yet?
Well, certainly there's going to be a lot of material written about this moment in time, and what this, introspection has meant to a lot of people, and how people are connecting in different ways than they've ever connected. So I'm anxious to see what really great writers are going to do with that.
If you could pick one musical theater team to write a musical about the pandemic, if there was only going to be one, living or dead, who would you choose?
I really, it's really not fair, but I got to say I'm very interested in anything that Pasek and Paul are going to come up with. So
yeah, I knew you were going to say that. Problem is, they went to Hollywood too. Dang it!
Well, they'll be traveling back and forth, I imagine.
What do you think the audience response is going to be? What do you think? How are they going to adapt to this new world? Do you think when the lights go back on? It's Dear Evan Hansen.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of contradictions, and there's going to be a lot of parallel courses. I think that there's going to be incredible enthusiasm and support for being back up. But I also think we have to be reasonable in our expectation in terms of what being a tourist and going to New York to see a show is going to be like. I think we have to be patient, and I think we have to be generous with what a lot of people are going through. But I also really, really look forward to that wave, that thrill of being welcomed back. And I can feel that. I think we all can feel that. It's like what happens when there's a technical error and the show comes back 10 minutes later or 30 minutes later or 45 minutes later. I mean, that kind of enthusiasm that you feel in those rooms, can you imagine what it's going to be like when we're back up?
No, I can't. I say this a lot. I can't. The ovation is going to be. It's like an hour. I mean, the shows are going to run 4 hours that night.
We should all be dealing with the musicians union now about that.
I think we are. Actually, we
about 15 minutes.
It's not even the ovations. It's actually, this is a very interesting. We joke about, that show may be longer, but all shows may be longer if we're taking temperature tests on when people walk in the door, if all these things, right? Maybe
it's going to be an unaltered event for a time. Yeah. And then hopefully it won't be. I think I have faith and optimism that things will come back. But it's not going to be tomorrow.
It's certainly not. My new phrase is it's going to be longer, but we'll be stronger as a result, I think.
That's true.
Yeah, because we just need people to be more comfortable in getting back to the theater first.
Yeah, and I think we have to be patient, and I think we have to understand that it's a different experience to walk into a dark, crowded room like that now. So we have to be understanding of their experience. And make it worth the while, really worth the while.
You mentioned, you had the benefit of all these great writers and great actors, but I think you're being very humble there, because I think an actor's performance obviously is very influenced by the director, and you've helped really create a whole generation of stars, multiple generations of stars, from all the folks in Rent to Ben and Dear Evan Hansen and all this. Just, can you talk a little bit about that development of a role in an original musical, and how, like, where Ben started and how you helped him get to where he ended up?
Sure. Let me talk about Rent first, because it was so remarkable and unique. First of all, the casting process with Jim Nicola and Bernie Telsey, with Jonathan Larson's guidance and my sort of big idea was we really were looking for some authenticity in that group, and we really took a chance on a lot of people who didn't have a whole lot of experience, because they felt there was an essential rightness. There was a part of them that felt like their character, or because Jonathan was with us in the room as he got to know and love that group, he tailored the material for them, and he really wrote to their incredible strengths. So that's one thing about how rich that experience was. Just a whole lot of trust coming from the producing organization and our commercial producers, Jeffrey Seller and Kevin McCullum and Alan Gordon, just in terms of recognizing what that company really needed to be to tell that story with some authenticity. And then, of course, that group, lived through the unbelievable tragedy and irony of Jonathan's death. And, talk about, the director's work of informing a piece with meaning and import. That Rent was always about honoring the young people in Jonathan's life who were dying of AIDS and taken too soon. And he was asking those characters to really recognize, how important it was to value one another and respect one another and to love one another. And he was honoring those friends of his who were dying. And then he became a part of that group. He became a part of that group that they were singing about in the Alcovy reprise and in Seasons of Love. So the way in which the stakes were raised, the way in which you learned to perform at a pitch and to always recognize that you couldn't slip below that pitch, I guess it was really defining for me too. And I got used to it, and I found a way in which I found a way to demand it in some ways of the extraordinary character, actors I was working with in productions to come. But a lot of it goes back to the remarkable and very singular stakes of performing that production in Jonathan's honor. Anthony would literally say at the top of every show, "We dedicate this to Jonathan Larson," and you felt it. And you felt it with that original company. And then every actor who then stepped into those shoes recognized the responsibility, and they really did it.
I want to talk, before you go on, because you just brought it so back for me, because I saw that original company, of course, and was so moved, and they felt so authentic and so real. And it felt like a major shift, frankly, in all of musical theater. We had Les Mis and Phantom and some of these big late 80s, early 90s musicals. And I actually got in an argument with someone who is now a very successful musical theater performer, because the voices were authentic. They were real. They weren't operatic voices. They all didn't sound the same. They sounded like the real people. And this person was concerned they wouldn't have a future. And that was a big risk for you in casting in that way.
It wasn't a big risk because I was putting a show on at the New York Theater Workshop. What I was trying to do with that show was I was trying to represent those characters authentically in front of an audience in the East Village, who would think that they were being fairly and generously and lovingly represented and not foolishly represented. I had a very different standard that I was reaching, and authenticity was really the key. And Jonathan wrote musically very differently for those characters, and he really enjoyed hearing different kinds of voices expressing it. And sometimes, the human frailty in the voice was exactly what we all most wanted. But again, I certainly wasn't thinking about, a decade-long run on Broadway when I was casting that. I really was thinking of, putting on the best show for that audience at the workshop, which I knew would be incredibly discerning and incredibly demanding of those characters and that story. They were living that story. They knew that story. It was always an idealized version of that story, but I wanted to make that story as truthful as possible. And so that's what I was casting for.
Yeah.
And then the world took notice, and the world said, "We want to see this." And then I really got to, great gratitude to Kevin and Jeffrey and Alan, who never for a second said, "Okay, now we need to change this story to make it more accessible," or "Now we need to change any of this cast because we feel like now that we're on Broadway and we're paying a whole lot of money, we can get a different kind of actor." They recognized how much a part of, the DNA of that piece was that group. And so I'm really grateful that there was never a moment, where there was talk of making it more accessible, making it, more popular, or casting up in any way. There was never any talk of that. I was very naive. We went and looked at Broadway theaters, and I actually thought I was going to completely restage the play because the play was staged very specifically for the backstage of, for the New York Theater Workshop stage, and the entrances were those entrances. I imagined that wherever I went, we would just restage the play, and that was
Chorus girls and the whole bit, like a
that was one sort of Broadway moment, which is like, I think it's working pretty well. I think you should leave it alone. But so that was the Broadway moment. But there were so many not Broadway moments, in order to keep what we had, what was working and what was very special downtown, uptown.
And how, well, first of all, I just think about those original auditions and imagine like, oh yeah, this is Idina Menzel. Someday she's going to record a big Disney hit. Like, what the last thing you ever imagined?
No, we all remember, she wore a fantastic little suede skirt and she sang When a Man Loves a Woman, and it was pretty great.
Yeah. Bernie, I had Bernie on my podcast and he tells that same story. Just like when she walked in the room, you just knew something was going to happen. Would Let It Go? I'm not sure if that's what everyone thought, but
Let It Go was very good to me too. A few years later with If Then. So
right.
I'm very happy. I'm very happy with success.
So tell me how Dear Evan Hansen and that experience was similar and or different when you birthed that.
Well, really different in that because we were dealing with generations, and because I'd been around the block a few times, when we cast the very first reading, I had, and with I think really the cooperation of my very, very, very smart and very discerning collaborators. At that time, it was Justin Paul and Benj Pasek and Steve Levinson predominantly. We were able to offer Jennifer Laura Thompson, Michael Park, Rachel Bay Jones, those roles from the very, very first reading. And that was from, decades of me seeing them in shows. I'd seen Jennifer, be hysterically funny, but also incredibly heartbreaking, which I didn't know that the whole world knew, but I'm going to tell everybody a little secret. Jennifer did a few workshops of Grey Gardens early on as a little boy. That was really something. Rachel, I had known for a very long time, but I had recently, I'd seen her actually in an audition. She's going to hate me for saying this, but we joke about it, that she didn't get. But at the time, it was like, wow, she's remarkable. And Michael Park, I remember all the way back from, I'm forgetting the one, Violet. And for years, you tried to cast Michael Park, and you couldn't cast Michael Park because he was busy in television land. So pretty remarkably, those people really came into focus very quickly. And Benj said to me, I know Ben Platt, and I think Ben Platt would be really fantastic as Evan. And I said, oh, you know what? I actually met Ben Platt because he actually auditioned for the tour of Next to Normal. And he was spectacular, but he was actually too young. I couldn't to actually cast. And so I was like, great, that sounds terrific. And then I think with the help of Tara Rubin, Mike Feist came into our life pretty quickly. Crystalline Lloyd came into our life pretty quickly. Will Rowland came into our life pretty quickly. If I'm leaving anybody out, I said Mike, I said Crystal, I said Will. I got everybody right.
Yeah.
All right, good. And and then we had a series of readings. And every time we did a reading, Stephen and Benj and Justin did spectacular work to the show. And you can tell that this group of actors knew it instinctively, that, wow, this is really special. I'm holding on to this, and Ben, from the very beginning, very, very beginning, just really brought such extraordinary humanity and complexity and empathy into a potentially, questionable character doing questionable things. And of course, the writers were always really, really keenly keyed into what they could do at every step to make sure that the audience would understand why he was making the choices he made. But Ben also brought that extraordinary Ben generosity and Ben affability and Ben optimism and Ben's open-heartedness to the part. And I think, like what I just said about Jonathan, I think that original company affected those writers, and they began to write to their strengths as well. And I got to be, a really good kind of editor. You know what I mean? And that's what it was. It was a lot of like, let's find a way in which we shape this. Let's find a way in which the beginning of this journey is very different than the end of this journey. It was a lot of that, but I had unbelievably great material, both on the page and in those actors to work with.
What's the thing you miss most being stuck in this quarantine that you can't wait to get back to? Like the first thing you're going to do? It could be eating ice cream. It could be anything.
Well, a lot of ice cream can be eaten in quarantine. So it's not going to be that. I miss, there's an easy sociability that happens in our community. There are people and places we visit, and there are associations and friendships. They're very casual, but I recognize how much I miss them. It's not only the people you work with who are very defined and you're going to run into. There's another group. There's more happenstance about it. Who you see, a couple of times a year, but you see them at an event, or you see them because you both love the same kind of theater. So I miss those kinds of meetings. I look forward to that.
That I feel like that's us. We see each other a handful of times.
Yeah, here we are.
Exactly right. Well, I'm glad I'm seeing you here today. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And I am such a huge fan. In fact, I will tell a story that I don't tell very often, especially since you told it. But I saw one of the very first readings of Dear Evan Hansen, and this guy passed on it. I passed, yeah. And I was like, I couldn't quite get there with what he was doing and going through and all the things. And frankly, I should have known with your name on it as a director that it eventually would have got to where obviously it is today. And I've said this to Stacey and to everyone involved, you guys did such amazing work on that show. There should be a book about it. Oh, there is a book about it in the development and how you created one of the most moving pieces of theater I've seen. It's truly wonderful. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you. And I really, you've got to credit those extraordinary writers who chipped and chipped and chipped away really remarkably. And, Stephen Levinson, great book writer. Once we knew that a song was going to last, that the song was going to have import, he managed to find ways of seeding, the imagery of those lyrics, to scenes, into the language of the characters, really into the gestalt of the piece. I mean, really fine writers. So I'm sharing your compliment with them, and I really feel that I should.
I'm gonna go read the script tomorrow because now I want to look at this. That's amazing.
Oh, you're gonna see. Oh,
cool. Well, listen, thanks. Please stay safe. Take care, and I can't wait to see you very, very soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Michael Greif, everybody. Fantastic guy, and obviously a fantastic director. One of the most successful, both artistically and commercially, the industry has had. Period. So hope you enjoyed all those stories about Dear Evan Hansen and Rent and all the other hit shows he's been a part of. Thank you for tuning in to another Producer's Perspective Live, episode 51. 51. We're going to wrap up today the way we normally do. First, to remind you, if you enjoyed tonight's live stream, Throw some money at the Actors Fund. Don't forget about those guys. I forgot to mention that at the top of the show, and Mary reminded me with this nasty little chat she sent me over here. Hey, Actors Fund. That's how much she cares about it, and that's how much I care about it too. So don't forget about the Actors Fund. Don't forget, tomorrow we're doing a very special Producer's Perspective live stream. We are reuniting the Daddy Longlegs Company, this sweet little off-Broadway show I did a number of years ago. You know, off-Broadway is a very challenging place to produce a show. But when I stumbled on Daddy Longlegs, I was like, I don't care. I have to do this. And people have to see the incredible performance of Megan McGinnis, which you can catch on Broadway HD. So watch that tonight. Go to Broadway HD, register, watch Daddy Longlegs. Tune in tomorrow night, and we're going to, oh yeah, use that code. You get it for free. That's important. And then tune in tomorrow night. We're going to reunite the whole company, and we're going to tell stories about, you'll have to tune in to find out. We'll see. What else is going on? Don't forget to stay safe and keep social distancing. Pay attention to the science, not just the politicians out there. Pay attention to those scientists telling us what to do. And lastly, we end every segment with something to make you smile. Something to make you smile. So we have all of the smiles on the website. This one's a fun one. So you know that classic tune, Cell Block Tango from Chicago? This is Zoom Block Tango. That's right. We all know the Zoom grid. Well, these fantastic artists put together the Zoom Block Tango. It's got like 65,000 views already. These parodies are really racking them up. The social distance, the Hercules one we did early on, that's got 50,000 views. These things are taking off. This one, go to theproducersperspective.com/smile. Super funny, super creative. The Zoom Block Tango. Throw those folks some love. They did a terrific job with it. It takes us to another end of another episode of the Producer's Perspective Live. We will see you all tomorrow with the Daddy Longlegs reunion. Bye, everybody.